So sometimes I'm asked what are the top things that I would suggest for businesses to do or perhaps to not do. Um, One of the top tips that I would say right now is that we are increasingly seeing business being done virtually. The statistics that we've gotten here at Raymond in the last year has been that people have been making purchasing decisions using online resources about 23% of the time, which is still really low, except when you consider that a couple of years ago it was like 5%. And so one of the top tips that I would suggest is not to neglect the electronic presence. And that's actually a bigger nut to chew than you think about sometimes, because what does that mean? Well, is that LinkedIn? Is it Facebook? Is it advertising on the internet? Is it TikToks, all these sorts of things. The decision makers at businesses are seldom the most relevant when it comes to the electronic presence. And so trying to meld the folks who have that relevance with how to project yourselves electronically, um, with the confidence of the business leaders, that's the number one thing I would say as we go into the future, people need to take a peek at. A corollary to that, which might be number two, is and this might seem self-serving, but I've just seen it go wrong so many times. Don't cheap out on professional resources, whether it's human resources, whether it's tax and accounting, whether it's legal and insurance, whether it's marketing. Um, I'm not saying be spendthrift and just throw money at everything, but I am saying so many times we see problems that have just been caused because someone decided to save a little bit of money. And, it's sort of like saving money on your car by not doing an oil change. That might be okay this week, but it's not a long-term plan for success. The third tip that I would talk about is getting invested with your local communities. There's so many avenues you can get involved with, whether it's local colleges, which become a pipeline for talent. And that may be just a low investment of popping into a class now and then as a guest speaker, answering questions from students, whether it's getting involved with local chambers of commerce, being involved even with some of the local football or soccer teams or things like that. Just having that presence around. Um, we do have this yin and yang between price sensitivity and supporting the locals and all of this. You don't want to be that entity in a local market who just has no presence whatsoever. And you also then can kind of have your finger on the pulse a little bit about what's going on around you. Um, the next thing I'd say is, make sure that you're relentless in pursuing opportunities. One of the things that we see oftentimes as businesses mature is a sense of tiredness almost, where you maybe have a couple of key people, maybe a key owner, something like this, and they've been doing it for so long. There's a point at which they get worn out, and that's an indication, one, that they haven't brought on enough people in terms of the succession plan, but also just a real warning to when you start feeling that tiredness. Uh, Boy, there's nothing wrong with taking a break. A week or two. Sabbaticals are fantastic things, even for a longer period of time. Very powerful, both to recharge the creative batteries yourself, but also to realize the organization hopefully can in fact survive without you. And if it can't, then you need to make some changes so that it can. The last thing that I would talk about, I think, as we look at what the top tips for businesses are, is again thinking about what's going to happen down the road in terms of the geography of your marketplace. And we do talk about staying close to the community as one of the tips, but also thinking about, do you have a product or a service that's got a global marketplace, and how do you get more plugged into those sorts of things? How do you be first somewhere? We have this analogy of if you want to catch the biggest fish, you want to fish someplace where there's fish at, and there's not a lot of other people fishing. And so that's one of the things to think about with your product or services. Where can you go fish where there's clients at, but there's maybe not the competition. We see it all the time where you're in a great marketplace, but you've got 5, 6, 7 big competitors around, and it's driving prices down. Whereas if you can pop in someplace, or maybe for some reason that's a bit untapped, there's less price sensitivity and so much more opportunity.